So, good morning, everyone, and back to the class on smart materials and structures. So, in the last class, we basically dealt about what are the characteristics of polarization, why you know the need of polarization, what is the importance of the polarization, how polarization is affected with respect to the dielectric material what you are selecting. Okay, so what is the variance in which the polarization will be affected with respect to the selection of the dielectric material. So all those we dealt in the yesterday's class. Many of you were in internship, you were telling. So see, I have just posted the last class recording into the Google Classroom as well as to the YouTube channel. Kindly go through it before you submit today's quiz. We mainly dealt about what is the importance of dielectric material, how the polarization affects the dielectric material what you are selecting, and how polarization is proportional to that of the electric field applied. So as you apply the electric field, the polarization also keeps on varying directly. So we have a constant of proportionality, what is called as alpha. Okay, so all these we dealt about how to calculate the net dipole moment. So net dipole moment basically deals with that of the moment what you are obtaining when you are applying the polarization. So the total dipoling effect obtained for the given sample of particular volume will yield you the net polarization. So this we have discussed in depth in yesterday's class, and also we dealt about different factors which comes into picture while polarization. So one of it is electronic configuration, ionic polarization, and orientation polarization. So based on the charges associated, so you will be having the electronic polarization. So when you charge, you will be having the positive ions and negative ions. So apart from that, so when you apply the electric field, the dipoles orient along the particular domain. So you have the orientation polarization also. So with respect to these factors of polarization, how the structure changes from cubic to that of the tetragonal phase in an ferroelectric material, we explained yesterday in depth related to lead-based piezoelectric material as an example. So all ferroelectric material will be having the AbO3 structure, which is called as perovskite structure, in which A stands for alkaline elements, B stands for transition elements in the periodic table, and O stands for oxygen. So based on lead-based piezoelectric, alkaline element here is lead, and transition element here is titanium. Along with that, you have the oxygen element O. So this we showed how a cubic structure changes into a tetragonal structure. So when there is a change of phase from cubic to tetragonal due to the polarization effect, that yields you in providing the best piezoelectric charge coefficient. At cubic structure, you cannot get the enhanced value. Only when it changes from cubic to tetragonal at ferroelectric phase, you will yield the maximum piezoelectric charge coefficient that we dealt about yesterday. And also how piezoelectric is varying with electrical field, the net dipole moment. Then you know ferroelectric is nothing but a class of material which helps in achieving spontaneous polarization when applied to electrical field. So this also we discussed related to all the characteristics of ferroelectricity, and we dealt about the hysteresis loop. So in hysteresis loop, you have the spontaneous polarization, remnant polarization, coercive field which is coming across. Please go through the recording of yesterday's. You will understand in depth. I will not be able to repeat it again. Okay. So apart from that, we also discussed about the difference between piezoelectricity and pyroelectricity. The material is said to have a good piezoelectric effect if it has high strain response for the load applied. Then you will get the highest D33 value. The second is if the material has a strong variation in polarization with respect to subjected temperature, then you call that the material is having a very good pyroelectricity in nature. Means at the room temperature, the polarization effect will be different. So as you keep on increasing the temperature, the polarization variation will be there drastically, and it will be more strong enough at high temperature, and it will be stable. So in that case, you can say that the material exhibits pyroelectricity along with that of piezoelectricity. So depending upon the required application, whether you need an stable polarization at high temperature or you need only the highest D33 value, based on that, you can select different combination of the piezoelectric material to get the requirement. So this also we studied in the last class. And spontaneous polarization related to the hysteresis loop. All ferroelectric material will be having the hysteresis loop. So where you apply the electric field, from here it start increasing, it reaches the maximum at reaches maximum polarization. So this is the polarization axis and this is the axis through which the electric field is applied. So when you apply the electric field, the material will be at A. It gradually increases and reaches the maximum polarization. At maximum polarization, all the ions in the given sample will be switched on. So when you off the current, what happens is the polarization drastically comes down and it touches the y-axis here. So the intercept where it meets is nothing but PR. So PR is called as a remnant polarization. So this is the polarization which is retained in the body even after removal of the electric field. So further also you won't apply the electric field, it still comes down and it becomes zero. So when it becomes zero, then you apply a negative electric field in negative direction. So first you applied the electric field towards positive X. Now we are applying the electric field towards the negative X direction. So again the polarization increases in the negative direction and it reaches the maximum value. So this is the spontaneous polarization. Once it reaches the maximum value, then all the domains are switched on. At that place, you will switch off the electric field. Even though electric field is removed, it retains some amount of polarization in it. How much it can retain, that you can calculate when it comes and touches our y-intercept. So this is the axis which represents the polarization. So here you will get again the remnant polarization but in negative direction. So here again you won't apply the electric field, it still becomes reduced and finally reaches zero. So it has now completed one loop. Similarly, again you will apply the electric field, it increases, reaches maximum, it reduces, and you see the amount of polarization retained, it becomes zero. Then you apply the electric field in negative direction, it reaches the maximum towards negative direction as well. Then you will again off. Then the amount of retained polarization is measured here, which is minus PR. So remnant polarization towards positive y-axis and towards negative y-axis, the magnitude remains the same. Only the sign convention differs. Similarly, the spontaneous polarization, positive and negative, the magnitude remains the same. Only thing is the sign convention varies. So this is about the hysteresis loop. What we dealt in yesterday's class. You please go through it. So these are the factors which you have to remember related to remnant polarization, spontaneous polarization, and one more I told yesterday, the coercive field. The amount of field required to reach this path is nothing but the coercive field. This is from A to this point, it is E suffix C, which is positive coercive field. The same thing when it comes back in the opposite side, this will be the same magnitude of the coercive field but in the opposite direction. Okay, so this is the field which is required to generate the required spontaneous and the remnant polarization within the given hysteresis loop. So these factors we studied yesterday, I just brushed out in brief now as many were not there in the last class. Kindly go through the recording which I have shared in the Google Classroom. So today we were supposed to start off with a device, what we call it as an inchworm linear motor. So until now we have studied what you mean by piezoelectricity, its properties, characteristics, applications, where it could be used, what are its effect, direct, indirect, right, when it could be active, when it could be passive. And then also we dealt about what is the basic mathematical formula to get the direct effect and the converse, and to do the modeling, which are the two constitutive mathematical modeling equations, and then how these mathematical modeling equations get varied with respect to different conditions, like when the circuit is open, I will be 0. So when there is no strain at all, that means that the load will be 0. In that case, how we will evaluate the constitutive relationships? So all those we studied. So now you have the total information, theoretical concept is along with the modeling part related to piezoelectric material. So now we should focus this concept into a particular device. So here we are now focusing on inchworm linear motor. Okay, so inchworm linear motors. So these levers are basically used for what purpose? Have you studied somewhere? So these are the linear type of motors which are used when you need a very small variations at the very accurate level. Okay, so these levers mainly reduce the input motion which is subjected to piezoelectric actuator, and they help to enhance the position resolution. So these actuators are mainly used to do some activity. So with the help of the sensors, it will sense the required data and the controller will provide you some instruction. So based on the instruction, the actuator works. So the actuator will receive the motion from the sensors and it will provide an improved way in providing a very precise and accurate way of resolution in positioning and given device from one place to that of the other. So for that purpose, when very small movement is needed with very high accuracy, we go up with inchworm linear motors. For that, we are now using the help of piezoelectric actuators. So you'll be having different patch of piezoelectric stacks. I'll be showing you the diagram. Okay, so the inchworm linear motor will be shown in this way. So here this is the inchworm linear motor. How does it looks like? So you will be having a moving shaft here, the small one here, which is in horizontal direction. Is our moving shaft. Along with that, you will be having the clamp A and you will be having a clamp B across the shaft. So this clamp A will be having a patch of piezoelectric material which is P1, and clamp B will be having another patch which is of P2. Along with that, you will be having a moving body. So across the moving body, you will be having one more patch of piezoelectric stack. Okay, so this is how it does looks like, and later we have to see how does it operates. So basically, inchworm linear motor consists of one shaft and two clamps associated with two piezoelectric stacks. Along with that, towards the shaft you have a moving body with a particular length. So across the moving body you have one more stack here of piezoelectric, which is termed to be as P3. The same thing has been explained over here. So P1 and P2 is mounted across the clamp A and B, and P3 is clamped across the moving body of a particular length L. So that you have to understand. So after knowing the basic construction of the inchworm linear motor, we should see how does it operate. So if they ask you what are the basic parts of an inchworm linear motor, you should tell that it has a moving shaft. Along with that, it has two clamping devices. Along with that, you have one push-pull device. Okay, so one push-pull device is nothing but the moving body on which the P3 patch has been attached. So total, it is a 3-stacked based piezoelectric actuator. Why it is 3-stack? Because it has 3 piezoelectric patches, 1, 2 and 3. So you have to say that if they say another name for inchworm linear motor, you can say that it is a 3-stack based piezoelectric actuator. Why? It consists of a moving shaft, 2 clamping and 1 push and pull device. So after knowing this, you have to understand that it has 2 vertical stacks, P1 and P2. So it has 2 vertical stacks, P1 and P2, which are mounted on each clamp device, and these are used to grip the shaft. Why these patches are used? Because you have a rotating shaft over here. It has to be gripped in one or the other way. So for gripping purpose, you're using the clamp A and clamp B, which are vertical for the alignment of the shaft. So on these two verticals, the patches P1 and P2 is been mounted. Okay. So vertical stacks with P1 and P2 mounted on these devices are basically used to grip the shaft in order to provide a proper grip to the shaft when you have a push and pull device which has been moving across it in the other part of the or the other side of the shaft. So to provide a proper gripping surface, you have this clamping device. So that thing you have to understand. And these are preloaded by adjusting screws. So these clamps will be having the screws backside, so that helps to have a proper clamping to that of the moving shaft, or else the clamp cannot stand by itself. So if the shaft gets rotating, at that time the clamp will fall down. So to have a proper grip, you have to see that these clamps are screwed to the shaft from the back end. Okay, so this is done by adjusting screws, because you can vary the length of the clamp how you need it by loosening and tightening the screw as per the requirement. So that is one thing. And next, the longitudinal piezoelectric stack P3 is mounted inside the push-pull device. I told this is the push-pull device which could be pushed and pulled back. So across this moving body, which is the push-pull device, P3 is being mounted or preloaded. Okay, so P3 is mounted inside the push-pull device which has a monolithic structure. So this basic structure is called to be as a monolithic structure. Okay, so that also you should keep in mind. So this monolithic structure further will be composed of two parallel leaf springs, two levers, a horizontal moving body, and a support base. So this push-pull device will be comprising of many parts. Here you can just see an rectangular bar, but within this push-pull device, in order to get the compression and elongation, you need some mechanism to be done through some movements. So how this required linkage mechanism is being done? So that is done by using two parallel leaf springs. So you will be having leaf springs 2 which is parallel, so that will be connected to the two levers. Okay, two levers will be connected to two springs which are parallel to each other, so that it helps in getting the push and pull movement of the given body in horizontal direction. Okay, so without lever mechanism, without any proper linkage mechanism, you cannot get and push and pull mechanism supporting to the shaft. So for getting this push and pull moment, the mechanism which has been used is of two lever with two parallel springs, so that you can get an horizontal movement across the body towards push and pull. Both will be across the horizontal motion. And one more thing, so this entire mechanism in the push-pull device will be connected by means of flexure type of hinges. So without hinge, you cannot get the required push and pull moment, right? So all these components to be connected through the flexure hinge. So this lever mechanism has been widely applied in many places where you need to amplify the given input motion to the piezoelectric actuators. Because you see, this inchworm linear motor is used in order to get a very accurate and small micro level displacement. So to get a small micro level displacement, the amount of input which is needed is very small. You cannot apply a large amount of load on it to get an huge movement, right? Because you don't need a huge movement or displacement across the push pull device. You need a very small micro level based displacement. So to get this small micro level displacement, even the input motion which is needed is very small. But if you apply that input motion, that should be sensed properly. So if the small variation in the input motion has to be sensed, the applied input motion has to be amplified, right? So this lever mechanism is basically used in order to enhance the input motion or to amplify the input motion, so that this motion will be sensed by the sensor, and it provides the instruction for the actuator to actuate or to do work actively, and to provide a very small displacement in the push-pull device. So this is how the mechanism of an inchworm lean motor works. Is this clear? Any doubts?
No, no.
Okay. So this is about the working. Usually they ask inchworm linear motor, how does it operate, its specifications, characteristics. You should be able to explain once you are thorough with the theory concept of piezoelectric material. So it has step-by-step process. I just explained you the structure, how it is made. Okay, so now in step A, what happens? At the beginning of the process, clamp B grips the moving shaft. It is not that both the clamps are fixed. In the beginning, one clamp will be fixed and one will be released. So you start up with clamping of the one clamp here. So clamp B will be tightened, so it will not be having any movement, so total grip you will be having. Okay, so the clamp B grips the moving shaft properly, and A is released. So with respect to whatever speed the shaft rotates, there will be not having more vibrations or jerks, because the clamp B is totally gripping the shaft. In that case, the clamp A will be released. So in this situation where one clamp is gripped and one clamp is released, what happens is the longitudinal piezoelectric stack, which is clamped across the push-pull device, that is the P3, will expand. So clamp B is gripped, clamp A is released, and in that case the P3 which is associated with the moving body will expand. Okay, so when it expands, what happens? You have to see. So P3 expands by switching on the applied voltage, and its inputs displacement is transmitted. So when the P3 expands, it is in piezoelectric patch. So when it has been expanding, what happens is you are applying here, this is a converse effect. You are applying the electric field to it. So when the P3 expands, the amount of voltage is being applied into this push-pull device. So due to applied electric field, what happens is it provides a displacement which, and it is transmitted to the lever mechanism which is within the push-pull device. So clamp B will be gripped, clamp A will be released. In that case, P3 will expand. Due to the expansion, the electric field induced or the developed in piezoelectric patch is applied to the moving body. So in moving body, you have the linkage mechanism. So this displacement effect is applied to the linkages within the push-pull device. So when the displacement is transmitted, what happens is it results in the reduction in the lever mechanism. So because the lever gets compressed, you are applying some displacement due to the voltage which is generated from the piezoelectric stack. So the lever which was stretched out is now compressed. Because it is a push-pull device, it compresses and it expands both due to the linkage mechanism what you have. So due to this, the lever mechanism moves the shaft together with the clamp B. Since clamp B is fixed along with the shaft, due to this lever mechanism, the shaft gets rotated. So along with the shaft, the clamp B also rotates, because the clamp B is totally gripped with the shaft. Means the shaft is constrained totally towards your right, and it is not constrained towards your left. Since it is constrained with clamp B, with this linkage mechanism displacement, the shaft rotates along with the clamp B. So that is the second stage. So the lever mechanism moves the shaft together with the clamp device B. one step, and it leads to the reduction in the input displacement. So due to this movement, it results in the reduction in the input displacement. First, the input displacement will be larger. Why? You have to understand the process. First step is this: the clamp B will be fixed and the clamp A will be open, and the piezoelectric stack expands, and as a result, the electric voltage, when it expands, the electric voltage will be generated. So that will make the displacement in the linkage mechanism. Due to that, the linkage mechanism gets compressed, and this movement will make the clamp B rotate. Okay, so input displacement is generated over here. And next is the reverse process which happens. Where is it? Yeah. So next, the lever mechanism moves the shaft together with clamp B one step. So when it moves one step, okay, it leads to the reduction in the input displacement. So the input displacement which was generally originated will be reduced. So now the pull device is over. So due to the reduced input displacement, it becomes push device now. So it is reduced, it is compressing the body due to the reduced displacement. First, the displacement was from here till here, and now due to one rotation, there will be a reduction in the displacement. So due to this reduction in the displacement, it will push the device here. So due to pushing, what happens? It leads to the reduction in the input device. Due to the reduction in the input device, the moving body will be now pushed. So first it gets pulled up and then it gets pushed back due to the reduction in the input displacement. First the input displacement will be more, and then the input displacement will get reduced. So in this case, well, when the displacement has been reduced, what happens is the clamp B is released, because now the displacement has been shifted forward. So when the moving body shifts forward, it is not attached with that of clamp B. So due to that, it gets released with clamp B and it gets engaged with clamp A. Okay, so now the clamp B grips the shaft. So when the clamp B grips the shafts, what happens is the piezoelectric stack P3 contracts. So first it gets expanded, and now since it is the piezoelectric stack is now coming to clamp A, so it gets compressed because the piezoelectric stack now touches the clamp B. So when it touches the clamp B, it obviously the stack is compressed. When it moves towards clamp B, the patch will get expanded. So the input displacement will be more big in the beginning. So when it is released from clamp B, due to the reduction in the input displacement, the patch P3 gets compressed towards the clamp A. Okay, so and as a result, the patch P3 contracts by switching off the applied voltage. So the applied voltage which was there, so now it switch off due to the contraction, and then the lever mechanism will return to its original position, because now there is no voltage applied, so there will be no stretching of the push-pull device, and as well, the lever which was there in the previous position, it comes back to its own position. So it helps in getting movement, change in input displacement as per the electric voltage induced by the piezoelectric stack. So here step A, B and C are very necessary to move from one step to the another. So when it is done, it helps the shaft to move forward step by step. It won't repeat continuously. With one input displacement, it will rotate one step. Again, with one backward input displacement, it will rotate the second time. With respect to each time related to the displacement, the shaft will rotate with only one displacement. So this is very much essential when you need a very minute displacement of accurate level. For that, the motion which is induced has to be amplified. So to amplify the input motion, we usually go up with linear based inch worm motor. Since the movement is since the displacement what you're getting is in the linear way, you call it as an inchworm linear motor. And if you need a backward movement of the shaft, so this is for the forward movement of the shaft, what we are using. Okay, this mechanism. If you need the backward movement of the shaft in anti-clockwise direction, then the entire thing will be reversed. The driving process what we followed will be in a reverse order. If you need the rotation of the shaft in counterclockwise direction or in anti-clockwise, the entire driving process what we now discussed will be the reverse way. So you will be having the clamp B here, you will be having the clamp A here. Okay, so the total thing so you'll be having the push-pull device over here and the patch P3 will be here. So the entire process will be reversed. In that case, the shaft rotation will be step by step in counterclockwise direction or anti-clockwise direction. So this is about the operating process. First, we dealt about the structure of how a inchworm linear motor could be constructed. Then we explained the operating process, how it operates, and I told you for what reason the inchworm linear motor is being used. So, along with that, you should also understand the amount of input voltage signals which has to be applied to the piezoelectric stack, because this displacement come into picture when certain amount of electrical voltage is induced by the piezoelectric patches. So, for that you should apply some electric field, right? So it is not an direct piezoelectric effect where you apply the load and you get the required electrical voltage. No, here you are applying the electrical voltage to get the required displacement. So all inchworm linear motor works on indirect piezoelectric effect or the converse piezoelectric effect. So we were speaking about getting the required displacement. So to get this displacement, we need the input in the form of the voltage. So now you should understand how the voltage has been applied to the piezoelectric stack. So this is a diagram which helps you to better understand the application of the voltage signals to piezoelectric stack. So we had like 3 stacks in the linear motor, inchworm linear motor. We had patch P1 across clamp A. We had patch P2, means patch P2 is nothing but the stack, piezoelectric stack 2 at clamp B, and we had a piezoelectric stack 3 across the push-pull device. So we can divide that into 4 steps: step A, step B, step C, and step D. What we now basically understood while the operating process of an inchworm linear motor. So by looking into the diagram, what you can understand, where and how the electrical voltage has been induced. See, now you can see patch 2, which was there at the clamp B. A uniform of 100 volt was being applied consistently until it has completed the step 2. Step 2 is nothing but step B. So once the step B is done, there was gradual reduction in the voltage applied, right? And it was stagnant until the step C completed. So from there again it increased slightly. So this completes the 1 cycle. Okay, so across the end of the step D, again a constant 100 voltage is applied. Why? The process starts with clamp B, which is fixed to the shaft, right? So when it has an electrical voltage supplied continuously, so it helps in having a proper grip to the shaft with respect to the displacement generated by the piezoelectric stack P3. Okay, so this now, this is related to P2. Similarly, P1. So P1 initially, what happened is it was released. P1 was released, so the voltage will be down. So there were no more work related to clamp A initially, because initially clamp B is associated with P2. It helps in getting the displacement. So due to the displacement, the shaft rotates, right? The P2, due to the displacement provided across a push-pull device by the patch 3, the clamp rotates here, and as a result, the electric voltage required to make this clamp gripped with the shaft was provided to the patch P2. So then to make this push-pull device expand and contract, you needed the electrical voltage induced applied to piezoelectric patch 3. So that electric voltage was being given. Initially, it will be 0. Okay, once in the step A, P2 will be active. It will provide you the required grip for the shaft. So once the required grip is there, then you slightly start increasing the voltage given across P3 because you need the required voltage to make the required displacement across the moving body. Right, so when you induces the electrical voltage in P3, so this voltage will help you to get the required displacement by compressing this moving body with the help of linkage mechanism. So for that you need some power, and hence you give an enhancement in the electrical voltage applied across the P3. So this P3 voltage what you have applied will be in the range of 20 to 100 volts. It depends upon the material what you are using, how capable it is to withstand the applied electrical voltage. So based on material capability, you will subject the electrical voltage. So this will be constant throughout until the step C is done. So once step C is done, it has no work because clamp A has no connectivity to P3 and it will be moving towards clamp A. First, P3 will be enhanced until step C is completed. So after that, the P3 value will be reduced because clamp B will not be connected to the shaft at that time. I told you when an input displacement will be reduced, this will be shifted and the patch P3 move towards P1. So when it moves towards P1, P3 patch compresses and this moving body will be towards your left across P1. So there will be no connectivity across the clamp B. So due to that, the P3 value comes down drastically across step 4 and it will be 0. At that stage, the voltage applies across the patch P1 will be higher. Why? Now the moving body is connected to the clamp A, and to get the required displacement, you need the uniform voltage applied across P1 and not across P3 because P3 is now deactive as it is compressed. Right? So in that case, you need the entire voltage of around 100 volts. So this cycle goes on and on until and unless you need the rotation of the shaft one step by one step. So this is for only the forward rotation of the shaft step by step. If you need the rotation of the shaft in counterclockwise direction, then as I told you, the clamp B and clamp A will be reversed. In that case, even the voltage signal diagram will be in a reverse order. So it won't be in this way. Okay, it will be totally reverse. From here we will be reading, from here we'll be reading, and from here we'll be reading. So it will be the total reciprocal of the graph what we are seeing here for input voltage signal. So this is the entire process of our Inchworm linear motor. Is it understood? Hello?
Yes,
Hello? Any doubts? Kindly ask. Clear? Usually they ask, you have to understand in depth. So this is one of the application of an piezoelectric device after you know about the concept and mathematical equations. So then I was telling all piezoelectric materials are ferroelectric in nature and all ferroelectric material possess an perovskite structure, and I explained related to this in the last class also. But I didn't go into the crystal structure or crystal symmetry in depth. It comes in your basic chemistry, what you have studied in your first year of Bachelor of Engineering. But still, to make it clear, an perovskite structure of an piezoelectric material will be of AbO3. So that is the crystal structure. So A stands for the alkaline elements. So all these elements which will be across the boundary of the cubic structure will be made up of alkaline elements. So there are many alkaline elements in the periodic table. It could be lead, it could be potassium, okay, there, and it could be barium. So all stands for alkaline elements. Then you will be having the transition elements. So the next column in the periodic table will provide you the transition elements. So transition elements, in case of lead base, it is titanium. If you go for lead free, it could be sodium, okay, that is one of the transition elements. So or else it could be barium sodium titanate. Titanate also is an transition element. So if you go through the periodic table and see, once you will come across a huge row of alkaline elements, huge row of transition elements. So you can combine any of these elements, one element from transition and one element from alkaline, and you can prepare your own novel type of piezoelectric material and try how well it can excel in the highest piezoelectric charge coefficient. And last, O always stands for an oxygen element. So it will be usually having an oxidation element to see that entire solid state reaction of the given composition takes place. To see that the reaction is completed, in case of any perovskite element, you need an oxygen based element, and hence the structure AbO3. So all the alkaline elements will be across the boundary, and the transition elements will be always aligned at the center. Okay, so if you consider this, it will be face centered cubic crystal structure, because all the transition elements will be centered at the face. If you consider each plane, so this is one plane, so you can see the transition element is at the center. If you consider this as a plane, the transition element is at the center. If you consider this as a plane, the transition element is at the center. If you consider this plane, then the transition element is at the center, and back plane here, so even there the transition element is at the center. So across the center of the entire crystal, you will be having the oxygen here at the face centered, and you will be having the transition element across the center. I just told you the reverse. The transition element will be at the center and the oxygen element will be across the center of the each plane. So this will be the actual cubical crystal structure of any perovskite material. But when you do the polarization and when you subject the given material to particular temperature, because you have to subject the piezoelectric material synthesized to an calcination temperature, suppose like 700, 800, 900, because you have to see that the materials what you have clubbed together is being mixed and required chemical reaction takes place to get the required system of the piezoelectric. Directly you will not be getting the piezoelectric material. Suppose if you want to synthesize a lead-free piezoelectric material, the raw materials what you require is potassium carbonate, sodium carbonate, and niobium pentoxide. So all these three fits into AbO3 group. Okay, so when you have to mix this raw materials, make into powder at nano level, then you have to that powder what you get at nano level will not be the lead-free piezoelectric system. You have to subject that to the heat treatment so that the chemical reaction among this composition of the elements like potassium carbonate, niobium pentoxide, sodium carbonate, the chemical reaction takes place and some gases will be evolved, and the remaining material which is held after the chemical reaction will be nothing but our piezoelectric stoichiometric composition of that piezoelectric system. So that system should be having this crystal symmetry if you have synthesized properly. If you haven't synthesized properly, if you have lost some amount of composition in it, then it will not yield the required crystal structure. If the required crystal structure is not developed, then you won't get the required piezoelectric charge coefficient. So every stage, right from selection of the material to synthesis of the material at nano level, then getting the required system of the piezoelectric material after heat treatment should be done very essentially. Then we do a sintering process to see that the material what you have devised in a sample is densified. So that sample should be having this beautiful crystal symmetry. Then only you will get the enhanced piezoelectric charge coefficient. Okay, so once this crystal structure is achieved, you can also know one more concept here. The crystal structure of the common piezoelectric material will be always having either 4 mm or 6 mm symmetry. So here we are showing for 4 mm symmetry, where you have I, J, K and Lm, because all the crystal symmetry will be having 6 planes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So minimum the synthesized piezoelectric material will be having symmetry across 4 mm. Okay, sometimes in rare cases it is of 6 mm symmetry. So in that case, the constitutive relation what we have derived could be focused across 4 planes. It could be I, J, K and L. Yeah, it could be J, I, K and L, or it could be K, L, I and J. You can remember the constitutive equation what we have derived in the last to last class. If we go back, yeah, here we are just showing two, either I and J or K and L whatsoever. But when it comes to the symmetrical nature of the crystal, we can focus the given constitutive relation until 4 planes. It's not necessary that we can restrict ourselves to 2 planes. But usually in mathematical modeling, we show only the 2 shear planes. But when the given crystal has the symmetry, we can cope up the constitutive relation what we have developed even into the 4 planes. So that's what being explained here now. Okay, so it could be in 4 planes. And when we are focusing the capacitance of a given material across the 4 planes, then the amount of electric field applied and the amount of relative permittivity what we are getting, relative permittivity is nothing but the dielectric constant, will be across 2 planes. If the electric field which has been applied will be across the 3 planes, that is I, J and K. In that case, the relative permittivity value we can determine across only 2 planes, and that was similar before in case of our constitutive relations also, so which is across I and J plane. It could be either I and J or it could be J and I. In both the cases, it will be the same. One of the important nature of this symmetry is if the crystal has the symmetrical nature, then the value what you get either in IJKL, yeah, JIKL, yeah, KLIJ will be the same. Even the electric field which has been applied, if you check in each of the plane, Kij, yeah, Kji, it will be the same. And also the relative permittivity value across Ij plane will be equal to Ji, provided you have derived your mathematical equation properly and did the analysis properly. Both the values should yield the same. So this is the outcome when you have an crystal structure of symmetric in nature. If the given crystal structure is not symmetric, then these values will not be the same. It will keep on changing because the symmetrical nature is not there in the piezoelectric material what you have developed. It again depends upon how you have synthesized the material. Is the synthesized material is homogeneous or not? Everything counts. So based on your requirement, you can develop either symmetrical crystal structure or non-symmetrical crystal structure. If it is symmetrical crystal structure what you have developed, all the values across the 4 planes of the shear will be the same. So next, there is a small active strain expression what we have to understand. So that we will do it in the next class. So now it's already 10:29. I will stop my presentation for the day now here. If you have any doubts, you are free to ask.
No doubts, ma'am.
Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, some students were asking for the prescribed book. I told in the beginning only. One is Smart Materials and Structure by M.V. Gandhi. So there is one more prescribed foreign author book from the VTU. So both of them you can try to extract the soft copy of it if needed. Okay, so what I have the notes I can share after each module. And I have the hard copies of the book, not the soft copy one. You just try if you can get soft copies, but related to the notes and materials as and how the modules are completed, I can share to you all. That is not a problem. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes. Any other doubts?
No, ma'am.
Fine. So Dhanush is present.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you please type your name and USN in the chat room. Harsha. Harsha.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please type your name and
Ma'am.
USN in the chat room. Yesterday also you didn't type. In the Google Classroom, we have a chat box. In that you kindly type your name and USN. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So Krut,
Yes, ma'am.
hello. Yeah, why late in joining? Please join on time. Okay? Or else we have to wait until you people come. Sandesh? Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, type your name and USN number in the chat room. I think you have written. And Mohan Ambal, is the things are understandable?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Hello. Yeah, please type your name and USN number. I think you have written already. And I have posted a quiz in the Google Classroom. Okay, since you people were not there in the last class, I have also sent the recorded video of the last session. It is simple questions for 5 marks, which has been shared. So please submit the quiz on time. I had scheduled from, okay, it is 10:30 already. So just take few more minutes and complete the quiz before your next class starts. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Then until next class, please take care and be safe. Submit the quizzes on time.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.